All right. Good morning, everyone. Give me a few minutes here to get started. I'm going to share this over on my original channel, and then we'll jump right in. But just give me a few minutes here. I see Marvin is the first one in. He says, "Want to hear this?" All right, thank you, Marvin. I hope there's something that's said here that adds value. Okay, let me see. Home. Okay, let me click on this. Okay, looks like I have a decent picture there. Let me see, create a post. Everyone's having a good Saturday thus far. Right. All right, so that was shared over on my original channel. All right, I think I can go into my opening spiel now. Uh, Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Dr. Anwar Youssef Dunbar, and this is Big Discussions 76, Science and Technology. As you know, there are this channel is dedicated to science and technology related topics. There are 4 Big Discussions 76 channels, just FYI. Let's see. And in terms of hold on, let me check my signal here. Okay. Occasionally I keep, it's almost time for me to do some upgrades with my technology because occasionally I see those 3 antenna signals show up there. So sometimes I realized as I've used StreamYard more, I realized how it actually works and why there's a bit of a delay between what I say and do here versus what YouTube actually sees, because StreamYard is the actual broadcast software and it's sending the signal over to YouTube. So if YouTube is getting a terrible signal, that's why you guys might see a terrible picture. Anyway. 2 months ago or a month and a half ago, this channel was temporarily removed. Fortunately, YouTube was gracious enough to reinstate it. And so that whenever that happens, that's pretty alarming, especially when you're midstream. But since that happened, I've been telling people where you can also find me in case my platforms go down or go away. So there's my original blogging platform, the Big Words blog site. I'm going to be reading off that. I'm going to be reading from that during this live stream. That email address right there, bigdiscuss76@bigwordsarepowerful.com. That's the email address that I set up specifically for my YouTube endeavors. And then there's a Big Words blog site Facebook page, and that's my Twitter handle there, and also my Instagram handle. You can never have too many Instagram followers. So Alonzo Hall is here. What's going on, Alonzo? Speaking of Alonzo, so where did this come from? Well, you guys know that I've had this channel for over a year, and it's been steadily building and growing. Right now, it's at about 750 subscribers. I think of all my channels, this might be my most important because of the fact that I am a Black male and I have a PhD in a hard science. So there just aren't a lot of us, and I think I have a lot of valuable insights to share in terms of starting a career in the sciences, particularly as a minority. And I'm going through a bit of an evolution here. I've been doing a lot of thinking about um, how I can add the best value, and I've been thinking about what I can add that's unique to our knowledge. You guys know that I've hosted several manosphere like panels over on my original channel, and certainly those are fun. Those can be fun. Those can be alarming for people who've never seen them before. But again, I've just been thinking about what's the most value. What's the most value that I can give back to the world? And I think this is a one way. Okay. So the story of how I earned my STEM degree as a minority. Also, if you're coming in, please like the stream. If you're new, please subscribe. And also my Cash App and PayPal are in the description box below. Because I don't have 1,000 subs on this channel yet, I don't have a super chat and those kinds of things. So the story of how I earned my STEM degree as a minority. The thumbnail, and I changed the thumbnail this morning. The thumbnail for this was actually, and of course I don't have it queued up. Give me 1 second here. I want to give you guys a little introduction before I jump into the actual story, because it'll make more sense once you have the backdrop of the story, and that'll tell you why this all matters. Got a lot of pictures in this folder. There it is. The thumbnail for this video, this live stream, and actually the background for this live stream is actually, the background image is actually this. That is the University of Michigan Medical School. And that, looking at the trees in the background, that this looks like a fall day in Ann Arbor. This picture was probably taken from a helicopter. But that's where I got my science training, which I'll talk to you about shortly. This was a very, very meaningful 5 to 6 years of my life. I learned a lot. And I see the Michigan Medical School research logo up there in the corner. The university didn't ask me to do this. I'm doing this myself because I think it's important. Also, I'm wearing my Michigan Pharmacology t-shirt. One of them, they didn't ask me to do this. So this is not affiliated with the university. I'm just talking about my experience. So this story, for the most part, is going to take place here at the University of Michigan at the medical school. But the story actually didn't start there. I want to look at the comments to see who else is here. Let's see. So we got Alonzo. Salute. Now, let me start with Marvin. Marvin says, want to hear this. I'm listening, says, good morning. Alonzo says, salute. Doc Phoenix says, finally managed to catch one of your videos. Thank you for being here. He says, good morning. Extended Clip says, grand rising at Dr. Anwar in chat. Alonzo says, extended clips, salute. And the Lioness and the Scientist Supreme has graced my chat room. Welcome, Nicole. So the story doesn't start there, though. The story actually starts back here in my hometown of Buffalo, New York. And by the way, I'm interviewing someone tomorrow over on my original channel about, he started a channel called the Buffalo History Channel. So I'm keeping myself busy this weekend. So that's our downtown city hall. That's a nice gritty image of downtown Buffalo. My actual science education started here at Buffalo State College. My mom is a Buffalo State College alum. This is broadcasting over to Facebook as well, by the way, so I think there are some Buffalo people watching. But it actually started here at the Campus West College Learning Laboratory. And as I've described in earlier content on YouTube and in print, my favorite class early on was biology or life science. From there, I followed my brother Amal, shout out to my brother Amal, over to Hutchinson Central Technical High School in Buffalo, which is our our technical high school. And we had majors at that high school. And because I had an affinity for biology, I majored in biotechnology at Hutch Tech High School in Buffalo. From there, in college, I spent the majority of my undergraduate years at an HBCU, Johnson C. Smith University. There, I majored in biology, general biology. And I really didn't have a direction in terms of what I wanted to do with my career. It changed from being an athletic trainer to maybe going to medical school. And then I got involved in a program called the McNair program, which was designed to get underrepresented minorities involved in academic research. So basically, opening us up to the possibility of getting our PhDs. So I want to thank my professors at Johnson C. Smith University who encouraged me to get in there, and also the professors at UNC Charlotte who mentored us and ushered us through that program. But at our HBCU, at my HBCU, Johnson C. Smith University, I was a really good student. I was a straight A student. I think I carried a GPA. I never had a GPA below a 3.5 at JCSU. And I think in my STEM courses, mostly the biology courses, chemistry, once I figured out how to do GChem, and then physics, yeah, everything was pretty much an A or a B, but mostly A. So I was a really, really good student. And that's a picture of the Smith Science Hall. And this is the Rufus Perry Science Hall. Those are all older. We have a new STEM building at Smith now. But I really didn't get to do, aside from the McNair program, and this was all circumstance, there were opportunities there, I really didn't do a lot of hands-on research. And I'm going to talk about what that is. And Nicole is here in the chat. When you talk to Nicole, when you hear Nicole talk, she talks about her research and her grants. That's kind of what I'm talking about. And as I'll describe, that is an entire world all in itself. And as I'll describe, that's one of the major light bulbs that had to turn on for me as I went through doing my PhD, was that this is a whole new world with its own culture, with its own rules, and its own way of doing things. So I decided that I wanted to pursue, I was going to do the research track, but at that time I envisioned that I would go work for a drug company like Pfizer. I wanted to go into the private sector and work in the pharmaceutical industry for a company like Pfizer or Merck or Schering-Plough. I was thinking about Schering-Plough back then. There were a lot of small biotech companies like Amgen and Biogen. And I think we had a few scientists from the University of Michigan leave and go start their own startups. Let me say that over. That was kind of a double. They left and they went and they started their own companies. Some had the skill sets where they were able to do that. But I wanted to go work in a pharmaceutical company. That's why I chose pharmacology. I was thinking about stable employment, just like my boomer parents. So I was my entire thought process throughout the entire thing was get a job, make money, get a level of stability, and call it a day. Okay, so that's important as well. I'm going to take another look at the chat here. Extended clips. Okay. So the Department of Pharmacology at the University of Michigan, and I'm almost done with this opening spiel, and then I'm going to get to the essay, and then that'll be it, because I don't want to talk you guys to death. So the Department of Pharmacology at the University of Michigan. So, and there were a bunch of jumps there, because you go from Charlotte to Ann Arbor. I grew up in a cold weather city in Buffalo, but also there was a bit of a cultural change there, going from Charlotte to southeastern Michigan. And as I'll describe, there was also a culture change in terms of the academics, because the life of a researcher and a graduate student is very, very different than the life of an undergraduate. And that's something I kind of parsed out and had to figure out early on in my first year. And as the further along I went on, I realized, okay, yeah, this is very, very different than my undergraduate studies. And so your thought process when you're going through this process is very different. At the University of Michigan, you had, undergraduates there, you had graduate students, professional students in medical school and engineering school and business school. And when you go into the graduate professional level, your thought process is way different than the undergraduates. So the Department of Pharmacology. I did a live stream at the beginning of April talking about part 1 of my graduate thesis. And I started waterfalling pieces of that live stream. I know for non-scientists, hearing me talk about my part 1 of my thesis, those of you who listened, I appreciate those of you who listened to that. But I realized some of your eyes may have glazed over because I was just talking about our experiments and our data, and the language can get very, very esoteric. But I'm going to just give you a short breakdown of that before I get into the story, because I think that's very, very important. So my graduate advisor had a background in drug metabolism and basically with pharmacology and toxicology. Nicole she researches in cancer. We're all looking at some form or avenue of human health and how to improve human health. Nicole is studying pathways of cancer and what things cause it, which disease states cause it. When you're in pharmacology and toxicology, you're thinking about what drugs do, like this drug, guanabens. You're thinking about what these drugs do once they get inside the living system. Some of them are used to treat hypertension. Some of them are used to treat impotence. Some of them are used to treat cancer. Some of them are used to treat allergies. So there's a whole library of drugs. Pharmacology is not a new field, but you can't do experiments. It's unethical to do experiments in humans. So in some instances, and on her channel, Nicole has talked about her experiments with rodents. In some instances, it's valuable to use rodents as models for humans. And what my graduate advisor, what he found was that when he treated him and his team, when they treated rats, male rats, in this instance, with the drug guanabens, this is a guanabens, this is an antihypertensive. What they found was it caused a loss of activity of our this enzyme here, nitric oxide synthase. That's a ribbon diagram. It caused a loss of the activity, and it caused a loss of the protein. I'm going to show you what that means right now. So this is a bar chart. I added this to the last clip of that live stream. The control, I think we all know what a control is. That's your standard untested condition. That's your control. This is looking at protein from the penile tissue of rats. After they treated the rats with this drug guanabens, they saw that the activity went away, but half the protein went away as well. When they treated the animals with the drug N-nitroarginine, the activity went away, but the protein did not go away. So there was something selective. And he and I, my graduate advisor, we had to go over this story over and over and over again before I actually got it. There was something selective about that drug in the middle that was making that protein go away that the other drug was not. So molecules, drugs, toxicants, they can have selective impacts on the proteins in our cells, in our bodies, and those can lead to disease states. So I think that's kind of what you need to know here about my research project. And so my project was to go in and figure out what exactly was happening to this protein and what was that drug doing to that protein to accelerate its degradation. I'll just give you one more little teaser here. Using a series of protease inhibitors. These two protease inhibitors that I used, one is lactocystin, one is called MG132. They were able to tease out in the cells that the protein loss might be due to this thing here, which is called the 26S proteasome. That's a protease system in the cell. I'm not going to get into all of that today. And that's what my research was, figuring out what exactly was happening to our protein that made it more susceptible for degradation. Okay. Now, before I jump into the story, I'm going to show you guys something else. I see more people coming in. If you're new coming in, please like the stream. If you're unsubscribed, please subscribe. And I'm going to show you guys something that I want you to keep in mind as I read through my essay. By the way, Nicole, she probably think that this is funny, but Nicole is the one who taught me how to use the screen share. So I always shout her out for showing me how to use the screen share. And as per usual, StreamYard does not have my my PDFs queued up. Give me a second here. I have to close them, unfortunately, and reopen them. I will probably just reopen one of them. Bear with me for a second. Let's see. I'm going to open with Adobe. Okay, so that's one. And that's two. Okay, let me blow these up. Now let's see if StreamYard can see it. Good news. Okay, so the live stream I did right at the beginning of April was based on the first chapter of my graduate thesis. I was able to, well, we were able to publish it. And that's here. I'm just going to scroll through really quickly. And the thing I want you guys to see about this and get a feel for is as I read through my essay, there's a lot of work that goes into generating a publication like this. This one was published in a journal called Molecular Pharmacology. And I think we chose this journal because these were very, very mechanistic experiments. And it was just well suited for this journal. So I walked through all these figures in the live stream. I'm not going to stop and walk through all these now, but I want to, and Nicola has shown papers on her channel, but I want to just give a feel for, as I read through the essay, how much work went into all of this. This, what you're looking at, is years and hours of experiments, troubleshooting everything, making sure everything was standardized, making sure one experiment logically followed the next, and just putting together as sound a story as possible. This is chapter 1. And this right here is the follow-up. It was chapter 2. And I'll probably do a live stream on this, trying my best to break this down. Again, a lot of the terms are esoteric. The layperson doesn't understand them. But again, there's a lot of work that goes into doing something like this. And when you're a graduate student, if you don't come from a family of scientists, a challenge is explaining to your folks what you're doing, and explaining to them why this is taking so long for you to finish your PhD. And also, just people don't understand what you're doing. That could be your family. It could be your significant other. They don't always understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. So with that, I'm going to take another look at the chat, and then I'm going to start reading my my essay here. Okay, so we've got see some joking going on there. Extended clips of Starbucks. Corinne Henry's here. Word of Life says watermelon has lots of arginine. That's a good point. So our enzyme of interest here, neuronal nitric oxide synthase, the substrate for that enzyme and its two isoforms, the endothelial isoform and the inducible isoform, because there are three forms of this enzyme. There's inducible nitric oxide synthase, there's neuronal nitric oxide synthase, and then there's endothelial nitric oxide synthase. And they all use arginine as the substrate. And that's arginine right there to the far right. That's an amino acid. And there are enzymes in our bodies that use amino acids as substrates, just like as Nicole described on BGS's panel about where hormones come from. The precursor for many hormones in our bodies, whether it's testosterone or estrogen, the precursor is actually cholesterol. So I'm going to jump into my story right here. I'm going to stop throughout, maybe add some thoughts to it, and then I'm going to go through. But as I read this, keep in mind some of the discussions Dr. Tieson Johnson has over on his channel about the low reading proficiencies of Black boys, and think about to be a scientist, how much reading is involved, and what things you're locked out of and what things you don't have access to when you don't have those basic skills, when you don't have a mastery of those basic skills. And also think about, again, the amount of work that went into those papers I just showed you, and think about the transition that I had to make from the east side of Buffalo to the University of Michigan, to earning a PhD, to doing science. There was a huge transition there. Give me 1 second. Okay, so the story of how I earned my STEM degree as a minority. And the reason I wrote this, This is from my blogging platform. I wanted to start to leave a record of the how. I think that the how, we talk about, we need to get more minorities into science. We need to encourage more participation in the STEMs. It's one thing to say it, but what all goes into it? That was my rationale for writing this up. So the opening statement here, this quote says, "It's my job to prepare you for wherever you go after you leave my lab. When you go into a company, no one is going to tell you if your presentations and writings are sloppy. You won't get promoted, and you'll never know why." Those are words from my graduate advisor. My graduate advisor, in discussions on this channel, I mentioned that my graduate advisor attended MIT for undergrad, and he attended the University of Michigan for graduate school. And then he went over to the NIH, which is the National Institutes of Health, to do his postdoc. So my graduate advisor was a really, really, really bright individual. Just when you think of MIT, those are some of your best and brightest scientific minds, your young, best and brightest scientific minds. So my graduate advisor was really, really a very bright guy, lots of good ideas. And when you think about the National Institutes of Health, that's where all of the research dollars for these experiments, well, the majority, that's where that comes from. Your cancer research, research for other things, the NIH. So I'm saying this to say my graduate advisor was very brilliant and very well accomplished. In my post entitled, "Who will benefit from Apple's $350 billion investment?" I cited data stating that less than 10% of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics degree holders are African American, a staggering number, as these are some of the highest paying careers today. With the first principle of my blog being creating ecosystems of success, and one of my focuses being awareness of the STEM careers, I wanted to tell my story. Thus far, I've published posts discussing the biomedical sciences I've been trained in, regulatory science, the applied sciences, and the transferable skills learned when earning STEM degrees. In these posts, I've attempted to make these sciences easily understandable for students and families with backgrounds like my own. See the story of my blog. Potentially, the most important story of all, though, is how one becomes a STEM professional. Okay, so the transferable skills, let me digress for just a moment. A former colleague in my postdoc lab said that one time that science training and science degrees are potentially the best of all because you get so much in your science training. I'm not, deterring anyone from going into business or the humanities or the arts, but the point is, as I'll describe, you learn so many things, and there are a couple of key things that you learn when you go through this training and you actually finish your degree. Just briefly, critical thinking / problem solving skills, the ability to multitask, organize, and coordinate multiple projects at one time, the ability to write clearly, the ability to speak and present clearly, the ability to work on teams, and the ability to adapt and understand new systems. So whether you stay in academia or whether you go into the federal government like I have, those are the things that you take with you out of the lab. The same thing is true for a drug company. Those are all the things they're looking to hire in addition to your expertise in your field. Let's see. I'm going to read this comment by Dooley Godot. He says, "Good morning, sir. I am a full-time meteorology student at Mississippi State University. I appreciate what you're doing, doctor. I know when I complete my PhD, I'm going to enjoy being referred to as doctor." Some people enjoy the title, but it has its there are some unintended aspects that come along with that as well. Okay. I'm a firm believer in teaching the how. It's important to encourage participation in the STEMs, but as a student who walked into my training not fully understanding the opportunity in front of me, I think it's also important to share what went into earning my STEM degree in a very open and honest way, the good, the bad, and the ugly. No fairy tales and no magic. In this post, I'm thus revisiting both my learning points, science-wise, and some personal challenges during the process as an African-American male coming from Buffalo's East Side. The latter challenges may surprise you. The majority of the visuals used in this piece are materials from my thesis. Click on any of them to enlarge them. Lastly, in this piece, I refer to my thesis project without getting into its specifics. I describe it in greater detail in my basic sciences and basic research post. So this piece is in the description box below, and all these things are hyperlinked within it. So this first subsection says, learning how to do science. I fell in love with science in the 7th grade at Campus West in Buffalo, New York. I followed that love into Hutch Tech High School, where I majored in biotechnology, which was the equivalent of AP biology. So as I showed you guys earlier, this was Campus West there, and that's Hutch Tech High School. And also keep in mind that what's interesting is I didn't have any STEM professionals in my family, so I am the first in my family tree. Though my dad did study physics and as an undergraduate, and he did become a science teacher, a middle school science teacher. At Johnson C. Smith University, I distinguished myself as an A student in my core courses as a biology major, which led to my participation in the Ronald E. McNair program, where I worked 2 summers in a hepatic liver physiology lab. It was my first time performing basic scientific research. Again, just briefly, you're working at the bench doing experiments. Nicole talks about this a lot on her channel. But even if you go ahead and work in the private sector or in the regulatory sector like I do in the government, doing basic research experiments and working at the bench, that's where your knowledge and your training is going to come from. Okay. It was my first time performing basic scientific research. I earned an undergraduate fellowship from the Environmental Protection Agency my last 2 years at JCSU. This precluded my participation in the Minority Access to Research Careers, or the MARC program, where I would have worked on a research project year-round and would have gained more valuable experience. I might come back to that later. But there was a program at JCSU that gave students access to research, but I got involved in some other things. And I might talk about that when I talk about how I got my last 2 years of college paid for. Having participated in the McNair program, I decided to pursue a PhD in pharmacology, thinking that working in a pharmaceutical company like Pfizer or Merck would provide stable employment. Thus, the sole focus for my science training was finding a job. That's important, because I'm going to come back to that. While a PhD in pharmacology would help me get there, I didn't completely understand what the road to a PhD in this particular STEM field entailed, as I didn't yet know how to do science full time. Anwar has never done rigorous scientific research before. My graduate advisor, a fellow Western New Yorker, wrote in my evaluation for my second lab rotation within the Department of Pharmacology at the University of Michigan. He gave me an A, which I was happy about, though based upon his statement, I wasn't sure how I'd done in the lab. Did I perform adequately over those 4 months? Did I underperform, but still received an A just because? Either way, he allowed me to work under him for my thesis project, perhaps seeing some potential in me. So in our program at that time, you had to choose a lab to do your thesis in, but you did rotations first to kind of get your feet wet and to see if you wanted to work on a specific project. And the graduate advisor got to see if they wanted you to come work in their lab. So, and afterwards they had to write up an evaluation because you got a grade for it. But he observed early that I had not had the experience consistently doing the experiments and doing quality experiments. So we're going to come back to that. What made me want to stay in his lab? After my summers in the McNair program, I knew something about the enzyme my graduate advisor's lab worked on, neuronal nitric oxide synthase. I showed you guys this picture. I'll show you it again. This is a ribbon diagram of, I'm not sure which isoform this is, but this is the family that he worked on. I was also encouraged by 2 more senior students in another lab to stay based upon my graduate advisor's talent, his productive track record, and the productivity of his students. So when you choose a lab, it's good to get the gossip from the older students in the department, but you want to look at how much that particular scientist has published. You want to look at also how many students he or she has graduated. So there are a couple things you want to think about before you choose a lab. And I was encouraged to stay based upon those things. By the way, in the coming years, when prospective students would visit our department, my graduate advisor was always very adamant about the prospects getting the current students' perspectives on the department. I think his reasons were that doctoral research is a significant life and time commitment, as you'll see later, and it's in a student's best interest not to walk into a department blind. Ideally, they should have a feel for the overall climate of their prospective department, its culture, its faculty, and whether its students go on to establish their own careers. The basic sciences and basic research are worlds all in themselves, worlds I initially did not know how to succeed in. Aside from some of my teachers in high school, there were no STEM professionals in my ecosystem in Buffalo. Also, again, while my summers in the McNair program gave me a taste of this new adventure I was embarking upon, they didn't show what the experience would be like full time. What qualities and attributes were needed to earn my PhD in the STEM field I had chosen? One very important quality / value I received from my home ecosystem was that of hard work and the importance of doing quality work. I'll credit my mother for this and her many years of making us do chores at home, which instilled a sense of personal responsibility and pride in my work. Also, the adversity-filled experience on my high school basketball team, which I'm writing a book about, taught me how not to quit on things when they got hard, another valuable tool. Lastly, I was always naturally very malleable, personality-wise, and I was open to being taught. My dad's words about excelling in my coursework helped me to get into graduate school and were useful until the end of my coursework. Once the full-time research phase began, it was a whole different ballgame as working for my graduate advisor required a host of other tools. I myself was a project going into my graduate advisor's lab, one which needed to be built from the ground up. There were plenty of challenging times for both of us, as my first 2 to 3 years were spent literally just figuring things out. Fortunately, he was willing to teach me as long as I was willing to do the work and be taught. What do I mean by figuring things out? The following is a summary of what I learned as I worked on my thesis project. So everyone, that's a picture of me. Let me blow that up a little bit. That's me in the early 2000s. No gray beard. I think I wore a goatee most of the time during those days. And as I go through this, as I talk about the tools that I had to pick up and the tools that he had to kind of hammer into me, I want you to think about maybe a master and an apprentice, or a sensei at a dojo, because you're learning a craft and you're learning from a black belt, you're learning from a master, and it takes work for you to know what that person knows. It takes work for you to understand things the way they understand it. And it takes work for you to kind of see the world and see the project and see the science or whatever the craft is the way the master sees it. So let me minimize this. I want to thank everyone who's here. So learning to ask questions, to be inquisitive, and to talk about science. This was a major jump for me. I added this learning point in last. Sometimes when you're a writer, you write things out and then you add things in later. Anyway, I added this point in last, but it may be the most important of all. I'll credit the whole department for teaching me this lesson. One classmate and professor stand out here. Verbally asking questions is essential to doing science. In my basic sciences and basic research post, I described how our experiments were questions themselves, but it's also very important to be able to verbally ask questions of peers about their science, both one-on-one and in group settings, in a respectful way. During graduate school, I sat in on numerous seminars, and I was initially afraid to ask questions in front of everyone else. Part of it was a fear of sounding foolish. The other part of it was that while I excelled in my coursework as an undergraduate, I didn't regularly talk about science with my classmates at my undergraduate institution. Over time, I overcame my fears and got to the point where getting my questions answered superseded everything else. So you have to get rid of the fear of not sounding smart or asking. You have to get over the fear of asking dumb questions. And that's a major part of this whole thing. Something else occurred to me as I was reading that, which is when you pursue a PhD and you choose an advisor, that whole department is still pretty much a village. So you have the one graduate advisor, but you also have other department members in there who are mentoring you along. I think Art Newstall is here. Okay, seeing and understanding the science through my advisor's eyes. You're going to have to drive the project. My biggest learning point was learning to see the science through my graduate advisor's eyes, and not just in terms of obtaining my PhD and finding a job. Okay, that's huge, because again, I went in with the hope of getting a PhD so I could go work in the pharmaceutical company. But at the end of the day, it's about the skills. It's about the skill sets that you bring out with you. So you can finish your PhD and not have all the skills that you need, which is bad because you'll go into a company or the government and you'll get exposed. So it's about getting all the skills out that you need. And that involves kind of growing and starting to see things the way that your advisor does. There was an art to science, a thought process, a methodology, a culture, and a lifestyle. It took about 5 years of training to get to the point where I could start to see the science the way he saw it and even talk about my project the way he talked about it. I needed to understand the science in its entirety and appreciate the process and all the challenges involved. I needed to approach my research like a professional, to design my experiments systematically and proactively, to think about the limitations of our experiments and the data we generated, to think about the next steps, and to always think about the final published paper. I just showed you guys those at the beginning of this. Doing science in the lab every day versus learning about it in a classroom. There's a major difference between learning about science in a classroom setting and actually doing quality science full time. For me, that involved being proactive about my work and being consistent in everything I did experimentally in my writings and my presentations. Our experiments were questions. The results were the answers, and we needed the answers in a timely fashion. Everything needed to be approached with a sense of urgency, and in a way, time was our enemy. It also involved thinking about the project when outside of the lab, something my advisor and his peers and competitors did, sometimes at the expense of other things. So, what does that mean? That means that these people were professionals, and this is the culture shift. This is going into a new world. These scientists, my graduate advisor and his peers, this was their life. These projects, getting these grants. Nicole has talked about grants. This was their life. So even when they went home, they were thinking about the experiments, and they were thinking about what we were doing. They were thinking about whether or not we would have the answers the next day. My graduate advisor's wife, I think she had to force him to go on vacation sometimes. And then even when he was on vacation, he was still thinking about the research. Some guys, I heard stories of some people. I know one individual had a notepad sitting next to his bed, and I think he said his wife got upset because when he thought of his ideas, he had to write them down, because when you get ideas, if you don't write the idea down, it'll go away just like that. And there was one instance where my graduate advisor, he took a trip. I think he had to go speak somewhere. He left the airport and he came straight to lab to see what we were doing before he went home. So I'm just trying to drive home the fact that this was their way of life. This is what they did. This is a culture and a lifestyle. And if you don't come from a background where there are other scientists, there's a learning curve there, because you have to approach it the way that they do. Let's see. I was now out on the edges of science, in the trenches, trying to discover new knowledge. A major part of this involved approaching my thesis project like a job. And in many ways it was, as my peers and I received stipends. It wasn't a high-paying job in terms of a salary, but instead the payment was knowledge and wisdom, which would equate to greater financial compensation later. So that was very much an apprenticeship. You're working alongside of a master. They did compensate us in terms of a stipend, in terms of paying for our tuition and our healthcare, but it wasn't a lot of money. But you had to learn how to approach it like a job. You had to learn to treat that research. You had to learn to treat that research project like your own baby. And that was something he had to hammer into me over and over and over again initially. Graduate research is in part a job or an apprenticeship, like one of the skill trades. That's huge. Again, a major jump going from, because you're a student, but you have this project that you have to work on and nurture for the entire year. That was a major jump for me. So it was kind of a hybrid between being in school and having a job. This is your job now. My graduate advisor and I had this conversation after my completing 2 years of coursework and starting my thesis project full time. I hadn't made the connection yet that my research involved being in the lab 100% of the time. It required being on time in a job like setting where I'd work on my project daily at a workbench, sometimes at night and on weekends. The data generated from my project would be published in scientific journals, as well as when my graduate advisor sought to renew his own research grants. Finally, it would be the basis for my completed dissertation, in addition to a record of my productivity after eventually leaving his lab. That part is huge because the work I was doing, it was the work we were doing as students impacted his work because he had to go get his grants renewed, because the experiments, everything that we use, the equipment, the -80 freezers, the -40 freezers, the orbital shakers, all of that cost money. And that's how scientists pay for their work, is through grants from the government. I want to thank Nicole and Extended Clips for the Cash Apps. I want to thank you all who are in here listening to this. I am almost done with this essay. Learning to multitask. I had to learn to work smart and not just hard. My graduate advisor instilled in me the ability to multitask and to have multiple things going at once, as he always emphasized. In addition to working on my own project, I was also responsible for growing the stocks of protein that the entire lab used, which was a huge responsibility. I was also the lab's chemical safety officer, who was responsible for all the lab's waste disposal, chemical and radioactive. Some of the reagents I used were radioactive. Multitasking was what he did on a grander scale all year. As a student, it seemed unfair at the time, but it's a skill that has transcended our lab into other arenas, as with everything he taught us. I used those skills here on YouTube, and I used those skills to start my business. Learning to compete. You have to know where the line is and then do your best to stay above it. My graduate advisor told me years later after I graduated. Though I didn't understand it at the time, he was teaching his students how to compete and survive. It's not widely discussed, but science is all about competition, especially in academia, where at any given time, multiple labs around the country and even around the world are working to make the same scientific breakthrough. It's an arena where ultimately the group who makes the finding first gets the fame and notoriety in future grant funding. There was such a thing as being scooped. This is when another lab made the finding first, leaving its competitors to either disprove it, to add something to it, or to work on something else altogether. Because my advisor was so talented and hungry, it never happened to us, but I saw it happen to some of my peers and their labs. Nothing was guaranteed. Just like he had to fight and claw to keep his lab running, I also had to fight and claw to push my project through to completion. I further had to fight and claw to stay in the department and finish my degree. Science and life are about competition. I know that I drove you guys pretty hard. My advisor shared with me years later after I graduated, which we both smiled about. At times, he was very abrasive, aggressive, and very demanding of us. It was for a reason, though, and I realized during my training that working for brilliant and driven people is hard, but if you can stay in the process and take their coaching, you'll be better off for it later. That was one of the first things he told me when I said, I want to come work for you. He said that I'm not going to pull punches. I'm not going to pull my punches. I'm going to tell you like it is. And so, and I think that's the case when working for all brilliant people. they're hungry, they're ambitious, and they're going to demand that from their own staff. So, and there's a very good video of Malcolm Gladwell. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Malcolm Gladwell, but he described a similar process when he was working at the New Yorker. He said that his mentor basically shredded up all his work and had to kind of just stay on him over and over and over again. And that's how he got to become the writer that he became. My graduate advisor attended the Massachusetts Institute of Technology as an undergraduate, the University of Michigan for graduate school, and then the National Institutes of Health for his own postdoctoral training before becoming a professor at the University of Michigan. We never talked about MIT in my ecosystem in Buffalo, and I just started understanding my advisor's pedigree toward the end of my training. His father was a scientist as well, and thus had exposure to science at an early age. And he even earned a patent, and he thus, let me read that again. His father was a scientist as well, and he thus had exposure to science at an early age, and even earned a couple of patents before starting college. So he earned patents before he started college. So he already had his feet wet early in the game because his father was a scientist. Don't get me wrong. Having parents in the STEMs isn't a necessity to getting into one of the fields yourself, but the early exposure can pay huge dividends later. So that's a thing of, if you know what to expect going in, you have a bit of an advantage over your classmates or your peers who don't know what to expect. And also, going back to MIT, me and Black Uru talked about this. In some communities, no one knows who MIT is. No one knows what MIT is. I never heard of it. And knowing about it early on, I think, creates a much larger advantage, or creates an advantage over kids who don't even know what MIT or the Wharton School of Business, or kids who don't know what those things are. That creates a huge advantage. This is a good place to state that my graduate advisor, his peers, and scientists at most research universities are driven by their scientific research, and they're always thinking about it late at night and even on family vacations. I already talked about this. The argument can be made that their research is their purpose for living. The truly talented ones are further tough enough to withstand any environmental changes, such as when the second Bush administration cut the NIH's budget, causing many labs around the country to downsize or perish altogether, while others figured out how to survive. You all are very different than we were. When I was a graduate student, we fought over the latest issue of the Journal of Pharmacology and Experimental Therapeutics, or JPET, said one of the more senior and celebrated faculty in our department, who was jokingly said to have invented the heart. I can mention his name. His name was Dr. Benedict Lucchese. He was a cardiovascular pharmacologist, a very bright man. He's probably passed on to the next life at this point. But what he was trying to say was, you guys are not as hungry as we were. I think we were all about getting in, getting the grades, being able to talk about the new techniques, but there was a certain level of hunger and curiosity that he and his classmates had when they were students. And again, that curiosity, that's one of the driving factors or driving aspects of scientists. Okay. He felt we weren't studying up on our field enough in our spare time beyond our core curricula. Most of us were only doing the minimum reading and studying, something my graduate advisor also stayed on me about during my training. Now, that's another thing. Um, a major part of it is keeping up on what's new and also on what your competitors are doing. So if you just have your head down working on your little thing, you're going to miss what's new. And the breakthrough you're trying to make, someone else may have already made it. So that's the whole point of that. A major part of this thing is just reading, the importance of reading, and keeping up on what's going on outside in the world and in terms of your competitors. Now, this part, guys, I'm almost done. This might hit home for a lot of you because most of you guys are probably, I don't know who else watching on the Facebook side, but I'm from the inner city, and there was a bit of a cultural jump as well, which I'm going to describe in the last part of this essay because I'm at the end. Okay. And this says, learning to manage my life outside of the lab so I could do science. This is huge. The accompanying newspaper clipping is from one of Buffalo's local weekly Black publications, The Challenger. Let me take a sip of my coffee here. My mother proudly submitted the story, and that's her handwriting on the top of the clipping. It was a big deal back home, and she even shared with me that I had exceeded her expectations, which was very gratifying. When looking at the clipping, it's something to be proud of, but what you don't see is that there were a host of personal learning points outside of the lab as well, experiences which could have derailed the whole thing. Being African American and ascending in education and a career often leads to discussions of forgetting where you come from. So I want to close with what I learned about how life outside of the lab can affect one's ability to do science and to be a professional. Sometimes it's actually necessary to leave certain parts of your old life behind. I learned on numerous occasions during my STEM training that I had to protect both my project and my life. That is, I had to make strategic decisions in my personal life that would increase my chances of finishing my degree and surviving to talk about it. I'm sure you guys are probably saying, what does he mean by that? While working on my thesis, I got involved in a very chaotic romantic relationship, which compromised my mind, spirit, and overall well-being at times, nearly derailing my project and potentially adversely affecting my graduate advisor's entire lab all at the same time. There was one day I consider a near-death experience, something I've discussed with friends and relatives only in bits and pieces. Fortunately, I survived, but this type of thing wasn't restricted to my significant other. So when you're doing something like this, the person you're talking to and dating, they matter because they can have an adverse effect on your productivity and your ability to concentrate and your ability to think creatively. Because I know when my mind gets bogged down with emotional stress, I can't think. But the larger thing is that one of my tasks in that lab was to create protein that the entire lab used. So think about, it's analogous to oil drilling. So all of our cars run on gasoline. That gasoline comes from oil. So if the oil production breaks down, you're going to get gas shortages. So I was the one making the protein, and I'll probably clip that and upload it later from that live stream. I was the one making the protein for the entire lab. So if that production fell off, the entire lab was going to be adversely affected. And the person you're talking to and spending most of your time with can have an effect on your ability to do your job. So fortunately, it never got to that point, but it came very, very close based upon what I knew at the time. There were two instances involving two close friends whom I consider my second and third brothers. I might get in trouble for this, but I put it in the essay. One incident transpired over a Thanksgiving holiday and the other a Christmas holiday, both of which involved nearly getting pulled into violent confrontations late at night at nightclubs and parties in my hometown of Buffalo, New York. One friend had too much to drink and, in the process of having his own fun, inadvertently splashed another guy with his beer. The guy who got splashed was unhappy about it and started following us around the venue. While I thought bullets might fly, my friend got away with just getting punched and knocked out temporarily. Fortunately, we both made it home safely that night. And this is while I was at the University of Michigan. So when you're at home, in your neighborhood, at a club, at parties, things can happen. And if you're there at the wrong time with the wrong person, things can happen to you too. In the second incident, another buddy wanted to stay and confront some guys over a female outside of a nightclub. Apparently, he was looking at the guy's lady, and there was an initial confrontation I didn't see inside the venue. My friend didn't want to appear afraid and wanted us to take our time leaving. When I realized what was going on, I wanted to leave immediately, something he and I clashed over afterwards. Fortunately, again, nothing happened, and we got out of there safely. Neither of these incidents were worth the potential price to be paid. Neither my significant other or either of my friends considered the possibility of my showing up to the lab in a cast with a black eye or with teeth missing, or maybe being laid up in a hospital unable to continue my research. The take-home message from all this is that you must be your own best advocate in life. None of us can avoid tragedies, but there are things we can avoid. You must protect what you're doing, sometimes from people around you in your family circle, friends, or significant others, because someone else's selfishness and bad decisions can hinder your life and professional aspirations. In my case, it was earning my STEM degree and starting my career. Okay, guys, this is the end. I appreciate everyone who has hung on and humored me and listened throughout this. Give a man fish and you'll feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you'll feed him for a lifetime. I included this famous quote from the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu because the road to my STEM degree was literally like learning how to fish. The opening quote from this piece is from one of my many talks with my graduate advisor. In some ways, our relationship evolved to that of a father and a son, which I'm very, very grateful for, as not every student had this. I saw several peers leave partway through their graduate training without their doctorates, either due to a loss of hope or irreconcilable differences with their advisors. Some were African American, but not all were. This is my STEM story, and there are many others out there. I want to point out that the point of telling this story was not for my glorification. As I said in the opening, I think it's critical to explain all sides of the process, in addition to simply encouraging students to get involved in the STEMs solely because of our underrepresentation as African Americans and because of the monetary benefit. The how is very, very important. If you're a STEM professional, I encourage you to also tell your story to STEM hopefuls in an age-appropriate way. I'll end this by acknowledging the late Dr. Minor J. Kuhn, or Judd Kuhn. Dr. Kuhn was not only a member of my thesis committee, but he was also a legend and a pioneer in the study of phase 1 drug metabolizing enzymes, also known as cytochrome P450s. Dr. Kuhn actually trained my graduate advisor, who subsequently asked Dr. Kuhn to be on my committee. He suggested me asking Dr. Kuhn to be on my committee. Something that surprised me as well, as we all looked upon him with great reverence. Growing up on Buffalo's east side, I never dreamt of being a part of such a well-accomplished tree of scientists. So that's it, guys. These are some other pieces here that I wrote, distilling down the sciences that I'm knowledgeable on and associated topics. This entire piece is in the description box below. If you want to read it for yourself or share it with someone else. If you read it, please give it a like. This one was pretty well received. And I'm going to go through some of the comments here. Let's see, we're at an hour, 15 minutes. If someone wants to come up and say something, I'll keep it techies here. If some of you guys want to come up and say something, I'll throw the link in the chat. But I want to say, I thought I put it in this piece, but maybe I didn't. There was a discussion me and my father had during this time where he said, when I was, when you don't have relatives, when your relatives haven't gone through this process and people in your circle haven't gone through this process, they don't know what you're going through. They don't know why your degree is taking so long. And I think me getting my PhD, I had a knee injury in there. And again, I had to learn the process. So there was a learning curve in there, and there were some other life circumstances that played a factor as well. But me getting it within 5 to 6 years, I think that was on the fast side. It takes some people in the humanities and even some people in the sciences, depending upon how things are going, it could take them as many as 10 years or more. So to get my degree in 5 to 6 years, I think was good. But my father, when I was describing what was going on and how much work it was taking and having to go back to the lab after hours and on the weekends, he mumbled to me, that must be some hard studying. That must be some serious studying. Well, after the first 2 years, after you take your qualifying exams and you're in the lab doing the actual research, you might be doing some studying in terms of reading the literature and knowing what Nicole Ali's lab is doing out in California, but you're in the lab working every day, trying to get your project to work and trying to generate data so you could publish it. And depending on how things are going, you're either going to get good data or bad data. You're either going to be able to publish or you're not. You might get scooped by another lab. So that's not studying per se where you're in a book. You're at the bench doing science. So I just think that was important because most people on the outside, the layperson doesn't know what that actually is, doing research at a Big Ten university like the University of Michigan or Harvard or Stanford or MIT or someplace like that. Today I'm doing a double header. So I have another one scheduled over on my original channel about Father's Day, which is coming up in about 2 weeks. But I'm going to put the link in the chat in case some of you guys want to come up and say a few words on this, maybe ask some questions or give some feedback on what you heard me say. So I'm going to drop the link in the chat right now. YouTube hasn't shut this down, so I don't think there's anything that violates community guidelines. Okay, wow. Got 34 likes here. Thank you to everyone who has liked the stream. I'm going to go over some of the comments here. As I was reading, I saw a number of comments come in. I appreciate everyone for being here. So the link is there. Let's see. Corrine Henry says, hello, everyone. Extended Clips says, welcome, Corrine. Word Life says, watermelons have a lot of arginine. And arginine has some therapeutic benefits. So guys, I'm going to bring up in 1 second. The other thing to think about when thinking about STEM careers, particularly in the biomedical sciences, because pharmacology is a biomedical science. When you hear Nicole talk about her cancer research, that's in the biomedical sciences. This takes a certain amount of delayed gratification. So While when I was at Johnson C. Smith University, my peers in computer sciences and in computer programming, they were able to go right out with their bachelor's degrees and get jobs. With a general degree in biology, I think the most I would have been able to do was teach, maybe. But I probably, in New York State, I would have had to have gone to get my master's first. So there's a bit of delayed gratification here. It takes time to learn these skills, and the payoff isn't immediate. Julie, welcome. You want to say something?
Yes, sir. Okay. I'm hearing as I hear. Is there a way to turn off the? I hear others. Okay. Am I on, sir?
You're on.
Okay. I can hear myself repeat back what I'm saying, so it's weird. Okay.
If you have YouTube open, then you're gonna get
Uh,
some feedback. So if you have
okay. Well, let me close YouTube then. Okay. Am I still with you, sir?
you're here, you're frozen, but
Okay. All right. Okay, that's better. All right, I can't really see myself, but I'm just gonna talk. I really appreciate what you're doing here. I know in my life, I grew up in LA in
yep,
the through this late '70s and '80s,
yep.
and my family came from the Bloods and stuff, and uh, I ended up in foster care at 5 years old, and I was in the foster care system my entire childhood. I eventually ran away from a group home when I was 17 because I was getting beat up every day, and I didn't know it wasn't going to work. I never graduated high school, and but I've always had a love for science and meteorology. So I used to spend my free time.
Are you still there, Dooley? Are you still there? Okay, okay. Now
Do you
you're
see
back.
me?
Yep.
Okay. I had it minimal. So okay, all right. So I did a lot, and I kind of wandered around through life, and um, I did catch a case when I was 19, but luckily for me, it ended up as a misdemeanor, so I didn't get any jail time or nothing like that. So thank God for that, and it didn't hinder me in my life. So but anyway. I ended up getting into IT. I used to work in the food service, or I used to manage McDonald's and manage different fast food joints. Then I ended up in Walmart, was a store manager there. My health went bad, and I had a heart attack in 2013. So that ended my Walmart career. So after I recovered from that, I was like, okay, I need something to do. Got into IT, been working IT. Now I'm a system administrator for Azure, Microsoft. Um, and now I'm pursuing my childhood dream of becoming a meteorologist. I'm in I guess by the grace of God, I live in Minnesota. Mississippi State offers the only meteorology program that you can take the coursework online. And they offer a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. Um, but the program is predominantly for people who want to be television weathercasters, but you can tailor it to your coursework would qualify you for the National Weather Service or the federal government employment because they have very specific requirements. So you can take that coursework for that, which is what I'm doing. And when I finish that coursework, I'm going to attend the University of Minnesota and work on a PhD in land and atmospheric science. So that's I've been kind of spilling my story through the chat room, and everybody's been encouraging. So I just thought maybe I would share. So, but the last year and a half of my life has been kind of remarkable because I had weighed 400 pounds. I had weight loss surgery in December. I've lost 130 pounds. I'm in the best physical shape I've ever been in, which is helping my school, helping my studies because mentally I'm much more sharp now because my health is so much better. So, I mean, I got my GED over a year ago. I didn't have a GED.
Okay.
So I completed a GED, and now I'm actually taking and passing calculus classes. I never thought I would be doing calculus, physics, chemistry. I mean, I'm in a place now that I never thought I could be. I needed a lot of tutoring to get through the math because I did not have those. I was in special education as a child because I have an eye condition that gives me, I have poor eyesight. So I check a lot of boxes when it comes to affirmative action. I'm an African American male. I'm disabled. I mean, I check a lot of boxes. So I was like, well, I guess my future's bright. I
Okay.
just got to complete the education,
Okay.
Um, so I don't know. I kind of you wanted your thoughts. So I'm looking for a mentor, like a black male, somebody that can, I can follow up with, and because you're correct about being prepared and understanding what the coursework, because there's a lot of work. I spend hours and hours studying, and my wife be like, "Oh, I want you to spend time with me." Like, baby, I got this work to do. This is a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
This is not humanities classes. I've completed my humanities coursework. This is hardcore physics, chemistry, a lot of math. I'm into my major courses now, so it's a lot of focus, and it's helpful that I taught myself a lot of the meteorology subjects, but there's a level to this where mathematics gets involved, and that's where I
So
am now.
okay, Julie, I want to get to some other two people came up, but I imagine so because when you're in meteorology, I imagine you all use models,
Yes,
and modeling is entirely algorithms and mathematics. So
yes,
and predictions and stuff like that. Okay, yeah.
yep.
Well, this is my channel. I'll leave an email address in the back chat. You can email me if I can help you. I mean, you're in a different field than I am, but if I can be of some assistance to you, I'd like to do that. I'm going to pass it to Dr. Phoenix right now. Dr. Phoenix.
Oh, thank you for having me. Good morning. I think you did an excellent job at explaining the nuances of getting into STEM and just going through that whole process of graduate school and getting your PhD. Because I think for most Black people, they don't understand that getting into these fields and getting the associated credentials and degrees is more of an attrition. This stuff takes years and years and years. And as a fellow McNair alum myself, actually, I went to your rival. I went to the University of Wisconsin. So
Okay.
yeah, I'm originally from Chicago. I grew up in Chicago. I went to
Go
the
Badgers.
University of Wisconsin.
Yep. I interviewed there.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Yeah. So and one of the interesting things is when I was an undergrad, and I remember doing the McNair program. The your research paper that you put up as an example earlier in your discussion, that's essentially what you end up ultimately doing in the McNair program, except it's just condensed into this summer program. So it's a really intensive summer long program. You're spending 12, 14-hour days in lectures. And the great thing about it is that you actually get mentored by other PhDs, other PhDs, and the interesting thing when I did it was that my mentor, I was fortunate enough. My mentor was a Black woman, but she had went to Northwestern, got her PhD from Northwestern. But but some of the other guys, some of the other guys that helped mentor me in the process. One was a graduate of University of Illinois. He was a brother. He was from Liberia. He was actually he was a nurse, but he was an epidemiologist. And that was interesting. And then there was another guy that mentored me. He was a brother. He had a PhD in economics. And then there was a white guy who actually went to MIT. Was a marine biologist. So the great thing about doing the McNair, and what I don't know if you talked about it, was that the McNair is the perfect springboard to a graduate career, and certainly to graduate school, because not just because it opened the doors for you to go on those college tours and go get a chance to meet some of the faculty and there at colleges when you're doing it, but also too because it actually provides a lot of tangible benefits, such as you don't pay a lot of those application fees when you're applying for grad school.
Yep.
It gives you GRE prep. In the case of me, because I ultimately ended up going to medical school, it paid for my MCAT, paid for a lot of my application fees and stuff like that. So one of the key things about it is that it also allowed me to get into other projects as a result. And one of those projects that I did was involving diabetic. I started really mostly doing all my research with diabetes and associated conditions with diabetes. So I started out with doing diabetic ocular diseases, so specifically diabetic retinopathy. Then I moved into doing research with one of my pharmacology professors. He was using X-rays, X-ray and infrared imaging to to assess and stage diabetic wounds. So I actually got training in his lab doing basic sciences. So I would induce wounds into mice, and ultimately, you know how that goes. But but the point is that it was a perfect segue into a graduate career, but also into many of these into the STEM and sciences, into specifically for me biomedical sciences and stuff like that. And so I think for a lot of brothers, well, this is applicable to all Black folks, but specifically brothers, if you are an undergrad, you really should be trying to get into McNair. But the problem with getting into McNair is that you have to have those relationships with professors. So typically you don't pop on their radar unless you're a pretty good student.
Yeah.
And
when I was recommended for it, as I said, I didn't carry less than a 3.5 or a 3.6 in my science courses as an undergraduate. So one of the professors came to me. I was actually going to go home to Buffalo that summer and do security again and serve drinks at a local bar again. And this professor said, no, you got to do something scientific, fill this out and bring it back to me. That's how I got in.
Yeah, that's essentially actually how I found out about it. So my undergrad, I actually went to nursing school, but my minor was also had a minor in biochemistry as well. And so my one of the students in my cohort, she had did the program the year prior, and I saw her project at a research conference, and she told me about it. And then my professor, who I had a relationship, she told me about it. She said, yeah, you should apply. And I applied, and so it was actually I think I had to get 2 letters of recommendation. And so one of the other professors was actually a brother. Because I was military, I'm prior military, and actually I know the area where you grew up in Buffalo, because I used to be stationed upstate in Fort Drum, so I know the area pretty well.
Okay, I want to give Keep It Techie a chance to say something. He's been sitting patiently. Keep It Techie, what's going on? Thanks for coming through.
What's up? How you doing, Dr. Dunbar?
Good. How are you?
All right. Good morning. And shout out to you, Dr. Phoenix. Salute to you.
I know, glad to hear you, brother. Haven't been a while.
Yeah. It's all good. So really all I wanted to come up and quickly say was I had to go back and watch from the beginning. I missed the beginning of the stream, but when I came in, I caught specific part where you was talking about just basically saying that we need more minorities in the STEM field. And so I just wanted to second that, you know what I'm saying, and just say I 100% agree. Every position in the tech field that I've held, I've been literally the only minority in the field or in that position. You know what I'm saying? And so I really want to see a lot more of us in the STEM fields. It's very important, I think, and it's and you're doing a great thing by, you know, telling your story, because a lot of times the youth don't hear these types of stories of how minorities getting into these fields and excelling and doing great things or whatever in the tech field, in all of STEM. You know what I'm saying? And so I really appreciate you and salute to you for just doing a stream on this. And I'm gonna share the stream right after this. I got a stream going on in a little bit, but that's one of the reasons I try to do these or I incorporated these interviews where I just bring in other Black folks that are doing great things in the IT field. I got another brother coming on. He talks about cybersecurity. He has a channel or whatever, and he's just doing great things in the field. And I think it's important to highlight these people and just bring it to an audience of other Black people. That's the main reason I'm in the Black manosphere, so to speak, is to just highlight these people in front of other Black people so they can see that it is possible for you to get into these fields and excel. So that's all I wanted to say. Shout out to you, Dr. Phoenix. Shout out to you, Dr. Dunbar. Just keep doing your thing. And
keep it techie. If there's room for me and you to collaborate at some point,
yeah,
let's do that. I want to, you know, do my part and join forces with other guys as well, so we can help make some sort of change.
Okay, cool. Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna drop my email in the chat or whatever. And I'm gonna just hit me up and we can get together and get something going, because I just love this type of stuff, man. That's why I was so drawn to the Black Brain Trust when they came through. I was like, oh crap, a whole bunch of guys, you know, prior service, you know, military, in these STEM fields doing great things and talking about it. And so this is needed, or more of this is needed. And so I definitely agree. But
leave me your email address.
Yeah, I just dropped it in the back. But shout out to you guys, shout out to the chat, and salute.
All right, thank you, sir.
No problem.
All right, Dr. Phoenix, do you want to get one more statement in? Because I'm gonna go through these comments and I'm gonna shut down because I'm doing a double header today.
No. I don't have nothing more. I don't have nothing much to say other than the fact that, you know, it's very important to hear stories like yours, because you know, I was fortunate enough from my time in undergrad on, even through going into medical school, where the folks that mentored me were Black. So I was fortunate enough, even though I ultimately ended up going to a PWI. And I know for most Black folks, that won't be their experience. And you know, it's just really important that you told your story, because like I said, in the time that I've gone through academia, you don't really see a whole lot of folks. You kind of get used to being the only Black person in the room. You might be one or two people sitting on a seminar. And more importantly, I think you kind of talked about your struggle in general chemistry, which is something that I think most Black folks are going to deal with. And because, I mean, for me, I struggled in chemistry, but, you know, again, you learn those nuances. You spend many hours studying. Eventually, you'll learn. You'll get some mastery over the subject. And so, with that, you know, just thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for having me on. Really appreciate you, brother.
Before you go, what are you doing now?
Right now, I'm in medical school. I've actually take my step 1 later this year.
Okay, I'll tell you what. If you leave your email address right there in the private chat, if you want to talk about, you know, what you're doing and maybe some of the challenges, I interviewed a gentleman named Dr. Cedric Bright, and I cut a few pieces of that off and uploaded that here. Medicine is a science as well. If you want to come back and have a discussion on how that's going for you,
yeah, sure. Be more than happy to. Here, let me put that in the back chat here.
Okay. And the other thing, based upon what you just said, to get the research experience, knowledge, and expertise, even if you started at HBCU, like I did, and unless you go to someplace like Meharry, you're going to have to go to a Big Ten university or an Ivy League university to get that training. And that's a jump as well, because you're used to being around mostly people who look like you. And now you have to jump into a department where there are people from Asia and India and the Middle East and white folks and, European folks. And so, you have to go to one of the bigger universities to get the expertise.
Yeah, and that's interesting you said that, because I went to a Big Ten university at University of Wisconsin, and I remember when I started doing research as a McNair, because I actually ended up ultimately picking up another undergraduate research fellowship while I was there as well, because I was in McNair, and I'll never forget when I was working with one of the medical schools in the health department in Wisconsin, that some of the students I was working with medical students, and I just remember just kind of my experience of dealing with them and how much it almost turned me off completely.
Yep.
But again, it's one of those things. It is a labor of love. You have to stay committed to it. It really is. You have to be able to see it through to the end. And I think that's why your story is so important, because you show there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
I dropped my email in the back chat. So thank you for having me, brother. I really appreciate it. And again, thank you for sharing your story, because more Black men need to hear stories like yours.
Okay. Thank you for coming up. Okay. So everyone, I'm going to finish this by reading through the comments, but I want to go back to what I was saying before those guests came up, and I want to go back to what Dr. Phoenix just said. And I want to reiterate and emphasize to everyone who watches this, whether you're watching it live or on the playback, that me finishing my PhD, there were so many instances where this thing could have gone left, and it could have come off the rails. A part of it was me not knowing what else I would do. A part of it was me not wanting to go back to Buffalo and say I didn't finish. A part of it was my graduate advisor being as tough as he was, him still genuinely wanting to see me finish, and him recognizing that I could do it, and him not giving up on me. There were a lot of students, and there are a lot of students across the country who start their programs, and they don't finish. And it could be because they have a bad project. It could be because they have a bad mentor / advisor, because your advisor is a mentor. And some advisors and mentors are not good at what they do, and the students flounder and they wash out. They walk away with nothing, or in some instances, they walk away with their master's degree. I've gotten asked numerous times, did you go and get your master's first and then your PhD? And I have to say, no, it was a straight PhD program, and people typically left with their master's because they couldn't finish the PhD. And that could be for any number of reasons. But the thing I want to drive home before I go into these comments, I already talked about that this isn't just studying in your room. That's not what this is. This is doing research. And for the non-science person, that's a bit of a nebulous thing. Delayed gratification. Okay. And I mentioned this over on the Roger Report yesterday, for those of you who are in those spaces. That's a Black Manosphere space. I kind of set this channel up. A lot of my support has come from those spaces, but I want to make this as broad as possible and maybe get out and do some speaking at some point. But I mentioned on Roger's channel yesterday that I think especially for Black boys and young Black men, there's pressure early to go and get money early and to go make your 6 figures or however much you're going to make that early. It causes some men to get involved in the criminal justice system. It causes some young men to wash out of programs just like this. Okay. And I think that's part of the importance of this message, is that delayed gratification and really just taking the time to develop the skills. That's the important thing. Based upon my background and where I came from, it was about find a job, get stable employment. Well, for this track, a major factor is getting the skills, learning how to do science. Science is a craft. Learning how to look at data, learning how to create data, learning how to question data, learning the techniques. That takes time. That takes time and commitment. And it's hard. So I think that's kind of the underlying thing about this, you know. And multiple people have PhDs. But as we all know, and if you don't know, all PhDs are not necessarily created equally. So I'm going to read through some of the comments here, and I'm going to stop because this is a double header. I'm going to do something on, I'm going to read a Father's Day essay over on my original channel, in about 45 minutes. So let's see. The Lioness, the Scientist Supreme, she came through. Thank you again for the super chat. I'm not the super chat, the Cash App. Nicole. I want to get Nicole back over here to talk some more science with her when she has time. Dr. Phoenix says, a fellow McNair alumnus, salute. Alonzo is saying hello to Nicole Ali, the Scientist Supreme. Extended Clip says, hello to Alonzo Hall, also to Nicole. Nicole said, true, this was back when I think first started this. Let's see, I think I got through a bunch of these. Let's see. Korean Henry said, hello to everyone. Yep, the Arginine comment, I already went through this one. Kareem Austin said, good morning, everyone. Let's see. Extended clips. World Life says arginine, amino acid, lysis as a substrate. Okay. World Life says, what's the difference between lytic and lysis? Lytic, when I think of lytic, I think of a lytic cycle. I might have to come back and revisit that. A lytic cycle. One of my professors at Johnson C. Smith University shared with us that she has to go back and reread and revisit some of her material periodically. Lysis, you're dealing with proteolysis, for example. You're cleaving a protein. And when I think of a lytic cycle, you're cleaving something as well. You also have DNases and RNases, which are enzymes that cleave DNA and RNA. So lytic cycles and lysis, you're cleaving something up. You're digesting something. Dooley says, good morning, sir. I'm a full-time meteorology student at Mississippi State University. I appreciate what you're doing, doctor. I know when I complete my PhD, I'm going to enjoy being referred to as doctor. Let's see. Corrine says, good morning to Goodley. I think she might mean Dooley. Let's see. He says, I'm going to the National Weather Service after school. I am 46 years old, got my GED a year ago. World Life says, that's what you call a heroic journey. I think he's referring to my essay in my story. I can't believe I'm doing calculus, physics, and chemistry now. That's quite a load. I have a 3.5 GPA. Let's see. GED to PhD to STEM. This is why I don't condemn and judge people. Let's see. My childhood dream was to become a meteorologist. I think that's a fascinating field as well, dealing with models, looking at weather systems and what Mother Nature is stirring up, especially during hurricane season. Karina Henry says, that's amazing, and I'm glad you followed your dreams. By the way, love your avatar. Smile is so bright. I can Definitely see you on the Weather Channel. Okay. A guy named Dallas Raines, a TV weatherman of LA, fostered my love of science. Dr. Phoenix said, after undergrad, I worked on a few research projects, one being a post-baccalaureate program at NIH. Yep, a lot of medical students get the experience they need for their applications by doing some sort of research. Alonzo Hall says, Dooley Godot, salute, brother. Your journey inspires other Black men who don't realize that there's no such thing as too late. Art Newstall passed through. He's another advocate of scholarship. Thanks for stopping through, Art Newstall. Peace. Thanks, everyone. Dr. Phoenix says, arginine is an important component of cardiovascular health in which it is converted to nitric oxide. Yep. It's used as a remedy for numerous things. Extended Clips is acknowledging Art Newstall. Corinne Henry says, love hearing these types of stories, especially about our Black people, which we don't hear often at Alonzo. Alonzo says, well, first he says, so true. He says, I grew up in the foster system in LA County. I wish I had the appropriate mentors as a young boy. AB Media passed through. Thank you for passing through, AB Media. I was hoping to get you up here at some point so we could talk some tech stuff. Dooley says, I'm blowing through the meteorology coursework because I taught myself meteorology subjects by reading weather books from the library my whole life. I didn't have the mathematical skill set. Let's see. I'm going to skip through. World Life says, I had to take college algebra to get accepted in the electrician union. I chose trucking, though, for a quicker debt payoff, though. Yep. If you're electricity, that kind of falls under the physics umbrella. Physics is innervated with mathematics, even at the basic levels. Toya gave a thumbs up. Let's see. World Life says, you can always work magic on the resume, put what they need, and go from there. Riley says, how did you break into it with internships? I'm about to graduate next year with an analytics degree. I'm not sure. That might be regarding meteorology. Let's see. Keep It Techie said, it's very important that we push minorities into the STEMs. Salute. AB Media says, wow, just 5 years. 5 to 6. I think it was just over 6. I had a knee injury in there, and it took some time to learn the process and then to get my systems to work once I really got into doing my experiments. Let's see. A few more because it's 1:21. I'm supposed to start the second part of my double header at 2. He says, minorities is a huge diaspora and all of their experiences are different. Shonda came through. Good afternoon, Dr. Dunbar. Brothers in the chat. Great topic and discussion. Thank you, Shonda. I think you're into nursing. At some point, maybe we can have a discussion on nursing and what that entails. Corinne Henry said, organic chemistry was very difficult for me. Well, I'm in awe of you all that get your science degrees. I never thought organic chemistry was that hard. It was more memorization. Of course, there was mathematics involved in the labs, predicting the products, but I thought G-Chem was harder. And even though one professor at Johnson C. Smith University encouraged me to do a double major in biology and chemistry, I only went as far as organic chemistry. So I never got into the P-Chem or the analytical chemistry. Those are probably much more mathematics intensive. Shonda says, kudos to you, brother. It's Dr. Phoenix, wishing you much continued success in the medical school completion and beyond. NC Worker came through. Good afternoon, everyone. Doc Phoenix says, thank you, Shonda H. Vote with your feet. I'm going to watch this on the replay. Thanks for this walkthrough on your experience. Black professor, Black ops, cybersecurity for the people says computer science, calculus 2. All right. Yeah, everyone. Thank you for everyone who watched this live. If you watch it on the playback, please give it a like and feel free to leave a comment below. I think one of the there are several takeaway messages from this. This was a process. There were numerous instances with my background where I could have washed out of the system, but there were a number of things that lined up just right, which allowed me to stay in and finish. But I think when someone says they have their PhD, a lot of people focus on the doctor title and they don't really have an appreciation for what all goes into that, attaining the degree, the culture, the scholarship. I see Art Newstall still here. The culture, the scholarship of it, the fact that when you get a PhD, your research or your whatever your job duties are, you're constantly turning those around in your mind, especially if you're in academia like Nicole is. I'm sorry, she's not in academia. She's doing something else, but she's in the lab writing grants and those kinds of things. I think she's in some sort of mixture of the two. But once you acquire that skill set, that's what you become. You're thinking about it. You're thinking about science. You're thinking about experiments. But the training is a path. It's deferred gratification. It's delayed gratification. You get the skills first, and then later on you'll make your money. But it's about getting the skills. And going back to the opening of this, I had a good advisor. He said, and this was an actual discussion that we had. And we had several discussions. It's my job to prepare you for wherever you go after you leave my lab. When you go into a company, no one is going to tell you if your presentations and writings are sloppy. You won't get promoted, and you'll never know why. 2 more quotes was that he acknowledged that years later that he drove all of us pretty hard. And he also told me, I think this might have been on my last visit to Ann Arbor before the pandemic. He said, you always have to know, whichever profession you go into, whichever workplace you go into, you have to know where the line is, the line of competency and the line of the people who are competitive and winning versus the people who aren't. And you want to stay above that line in all costs and in all instances. So I'm rambling now, so I better stop. So everyone, thank you for being here. Thank you for those who donated. If you're watching on the playback, again, please like, share, and subscribe. This channel is right at 750 subscribers. I think this might be my most important channel based upon the messaging here, such as that which I talked about today. So it'll be cool to get this channel to 1,000. So everyone, enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Again, I'm doing a double header over on my part 2 will be over on my original channel. I have a Father's Day story to tell, a money related Father's Day story to tell, which I'm sure some of you will find entertaining and educational. So enjoy the rest of your Saturday. And as always, remember, let me minimize this. As always, remember that your attitude determines your altitude. Take care, and I'll talk to you the next time. Bye-bye.